Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the Cleveland Browns after a win against the Baltimore Ravens. An unbelievable showing from Jameis Winston and the Cleveland Browns, hosting the Ravens the day after the passing of Jim Donovan. May he rest in peace. An unbelievable win for this team whose backs were against the wall like you'd never believe. Zay, how were the vibes downtown yesterday?
Electric after it was such a beautiful sight to see because I haven't experienced that was my first win in the Muni lot. Like, as crazy as that sounds, we've been down there. I thought I was the jinx, but I'm like, wait, we've been at home. But that was the first win. So every time that we've seen losses, the Muni lot was gone. I mean, empty by the time the game ended at 4. By 4:10, most of the cars were out. By 4:15, you seen it was full of seagulls. Yesterday, different story. There were cars that were still there when I left, which was never there because I'm usually the last one to leave. And everyone just was it felt good to get that one. You felt the burden off of Cleveland's back. So definitely high compared to what it felt like in the morning. And I expect it to be electric next week, really.
Yeah. Next week is going to be crazy. Get the Chargers at home, bye, travel to New Orleans. Got a couple winnable games ahead of you. Don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but you feel now, and the announcers said it, the players said it, you felt like there was a different atmosphere in the game. I don't know if it was the coordinator change, the quarterback change, probably both to some extent. That was a different team out there. That really, really was. What do you think was the biggest aspect in that? Was it Jameis Winston?
You know, we kind of steered away from it because you can't really try to run with a narrative like a player's not wanting to play for a certain somebody. But sometimes your eyes tell you a certain story, and sometimes you can't deny what you've seen. And this never felt more like Joe Flacco. We talk about we wanted Joe Flacco back. We had the same aura as Joe Flacco last year. And was it Jameis? Was it Dorsey? The offensive line found a way to block? So as much as I don't want to go that route, I think there has to be some dialogue and there has to be some merit to that because you don't miraculously find a way to throw for 330 yards. Now, granted, hold on. Let me take a step back because Jameis Winston had his anticipation on throws. Those guys weren't open a lot of the times. He was throwing guys open. David Njoku, that touchdown pass, he wasn't open. He threw him open. The sideline catch, he threw him open. But the offensive line was night and day difference. We were running the ball effectively. We were even on both sides. The stat was Jameis Winston or Deshaun Watson took 17 games to throw 15 yards or more 9 times, right? It took Jameis Winston 1 game to do that. There has to be some merit to it, bro. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I fully agree with you and you saying that it looked like they were playing for something bigger. Like it looked like the will was there. And again, this was a week where so many big changes happened, and it wasn't just the quarterback position. Brand new play caller is a huge change. DeJuan Jones playing a new position. Like there's a lot of big changes that happened this week, and it was the closest thing to a fresh start minus your record that you could have as the Cleveland Browns. But I think we'd agree if we sat here and say Jameis Winston wasn't the biggest factor in this. Like it was an unbelievable performance. Granted, I talked about this. There were a couple passes that could have been and probably should have been intercepted, could have changed the outcome of the game. But at the end of the day, they weren't. And we talk about Denzel Ward dropping all these picks this year. Like the other side, there were some plays the Browns could have made too. It could have gone either way. But Jameis Winston, 300 plus yards, 3 touchdowns, technically turnover for interception, free football. He had the fumble, but the offensive line played significantly better. And that's what you heard Kevin Stefanski talk about a bunch in the press conference. They kept Jameis Winston upright and just let him go make plays. Cedric Tillman winning one-on-ones, the touchdown, the big slant he caught for a touchdown, I think it was a second down, just a little slant route where he caught it.
Third. It was on the highlights, third.
Yeah. He just broke 2 tackles like you wouldn't believe. That's a big dude who can move fast. You talked about that all offseason.
We talked about how he's an AFC North type player. Whenever it was the last year, I think it was against the Ravens. It was either the Ravens or the Steelers where he had that massive crackback block on that run. I don't remember who ran it, but he is so built for this division.
Yep.
And how many times did I say Remember when I said if Amari Cooper is out the door, Cedric Tillman can very easily be ushered into number one. He
Yep.
has the skill set, he has the talent, and most importantly, he's a big physical specimen. The Cleveland Browns never get this type of player.
No, I mean, this was a classic. I mean, he had 99 yards. I'm going to say 100-yard performance. A classic 100-yard performance and a huge game. Huge game. And the Browns outmatched the Ravens secondary. Granted, they were without a couple DBs, but completely outmatched that secondary. One of Jerry Jeudy's best games as a Cleveland Brown. David Njoku got a touchdown, had a couple huge catches. I think the second play of the game, that diving catch he had across the field. Great throw, but ridiculous catch. And then Elijah Moore got more involved. That's what I talked about before this week, too. The two things the Browns didn't really have when Stefanski was calling plays: screen game, which wasn't really there. That's maybe not their speed, whatever.
And they went there. They tried to go to it last game.
Yeah, so it wasn't wonderful. It wasn't great, but that was not there. And then they were dead last in terms of slot route target. And they threw the ball to Elijah Moore. I can't remember how many catches
12 targets.
12 targets.
8 catches, 85 yards.
Like, that's unbelievable. And that's a guy you got beginning of last season to like step in and be a true number 2 or a true number 3. And almost like a safety blanket, David Njoku is going to be the guy who goes and makes dynamic plays down the field. They finally got him involved. I thought Nick Chubb ran the ball really well. He looked as healthy as he's been. Granted, it wasn't a ton of production on the ground, but him and Foreman seemed like they every time they needed a big run or needed to stay ahead of the chains on like a 2nd and 10, they were getting 6-7 yards. Like, they ran the ball effectively. And that's what we've talked about all year, especially in the Dorsey offense. You don't need to pound the ball 20 times a game with Nick Chubb. You just got to run effectively. Keep yourself ahead of the chains. And the Ravens couldn't do anything about it.
I mean, 16 carries is they gave him his workload pretty quickly, right? We talked about what we were going to do with Nick Chubb's workload. And I think a big thing that set this offense up in a great position was you looked over and you saw how even it was to come out. At one point, it was 9 passes, 8 rushes, and the rushes weren't by any means these effective rushes. But in past weeks, you get 1 or 2 yards, and Kevin Stefanski's throwing the ball for 7 consecutive times. Yeah. It's amazing how big of a difference it is when you actually let the run game, and the defense has to stay true and honest. And then the holes that Nick Chubb is finding. There was the one play that he had on a cutback run where he jumped through this little guy. I don't even know if I could have got through that hole. Like, you weren't getting that before. No. So he's definitely getting back into speed. I think the Elijah Moore thing, when we talked about it, I think it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. It was 1 or 2 weeks after the Jacksonville game, where I mentioned when you get Elijah Moore targets and he gets involved, it seems as if the offense moves the ball a lot. He's 100%. Leading our team in targets, 12 targets. And how funny is it that all of these guys just seem to be open? We have the best route runners on the team, and wow, they're actually open. So it also makes you go back to Deshaun Watson and wonder if it's always been there. Has it always been there?
I don't know. It's tough to tell. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the 2 wins the Browns have this year have been the 2 biggest Elijah Moore games. Like, that to me is a very, very telling thing. And it's not always a big play down the field. Frankly, it's never really a big play down the field with Elijah Moore. It's just staying ahead of the chains. It's converting big 3rd downs. He is a crucial part of this offense. How about the offensive line, though? We talked about it very briefly. What got into these guys? Was it the DeJuan Jones change? Was it the Ravens just not having enough defensively? Like, this is the best offensive line performance we've seen all year, and it came in the biggest stage. Like, where has this been all year? Especially because, like, you look at the tackle situation, and we walked into the year like, oh, this is a good problem to have. We got DeJuan Jones, Jack Conklin, Jed Wills. Like, somebody just got to shore up the left side, and the right side's going to be good. Neither side had been good, really, coming into this game. And now all of a sudden, DeJuan Jones, like, moves over to the other side. Jack Conklin, like, these guys blocked like you'd never seen before on the game after a quarterback change. Like,
quarterback change, offensive, like the scheme, like where the protection's different, was the call. This is why it's so interesting, because like these next couple weeks will be telling, and it kind of sucks that we have the bye week coming up, because the rhythm and the groove will probably shift a little bit, although you'll get a little bit more game plan execution or a little bit more of the playbook you could probably go to with Dorsey. But I'm so excited to see if this is going to be the case, because it's going to be real tough with this Kevin Stefanski conversation and how it maneuvers. And was he really the reason why the plays weren't being executed properly, or was he calling a different scheme? Because I think back at some of the times and it's like, I've never not liked Kevin Stefanski's play calling. I just think that situationally he had some bad moments and he kind of overcomplicated things. Dorsey looked like he simplified a lot of things last week. Instead of running the same type of runs, there were some counter runs in there, misdirections. Like there were, and then we tested the Jameis Winston again. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but it's just crazy how it flipped in a matter of a week. And I think this is why we're sitting here trying to figure out why that was. And I think it starts with the trenches, the offensive line. So it's going to be nice to see DeJuan Jones. Obviously, he had the one full start penalty, which went in, death taxes, and DeJuan Jones giving you one full start. But if you can get that out of him, now you can maybe get a third, fourth rounder for Jed. I think that's still a very, very valuable piece. Conklin, you still got his contract that you can pan out, and your offensive line seemed to be serviceable. So let's get it, baby.
Yeah, and I also do want to make one thing clear, at least that I noticed looking at like the Ravens pressure rate. It's not like the pocket was clean for Jameis Winston all day, but there was enough time that he could make throws. Like he was still pressured on a good amount of dropbacks, not as much as the Browns pressured Lamar Jackson, which is very interesting to know. I don't know if you saw it. The Browns pressured Lamar Jackson on almost half of the dropbacks. Like that's a ridiculous number. That defensive line played an unbelievable game. But the other side of the ball, Jameis was still getting pressured. He was just making big time throws under pressure, which sometimes Deshaun Watson would airmail some. Like this was to me a quarterback change game. And I know I talked about Dorsey a bunch too, but the offensive line just giving Jameis enough time was what they needed. And this is one of the better defensive lines, defensive fronts, overall defenses you're going to face all year. For the Browns, you got to feel like if you can do it against these guys, you can do it against a lot of teams.
I mean, this is what we were waiting for. Like, see, I think this game would be a lot different. I think context comes into play heavy here, because if the Browns were to just come out and, scrape away one of those wins where it was like, man, I don't know if they really weren't supposed to win this game. Like a lot of Ravens fans are going to say we handed you this game. And yeah, you guys dropped some passes, but luck is part of it.
Yeah.
I look at this and I'm like, the Browns looked pretty commanding. If you're gonna get this out of the offense, and we talked about this, the defense has looked good. They gave up 10 points in the first half, and one of those came at Jameis Winston fumble when you shouldn't even been in that passing situation on 3rd and 15 to begin with. So they looked dominant, and they looked dominant versus a team that is the best in the league. I think we can all collectively agree and say that the Ravens were the best team in the league up until this point, just like last year.
Yes.
And we know what the run sparked after that. So
you
got the Chargers coming in next week. If you find a way to win that, you're going into the break with a 2-game win streak. And then it's going to be a Cleveland Browns home game in the NOLA. I think it's going to be unreal. I know we're trying to go.
Yeah.
We're going to try to make this happen. I can't imagine the atmosphere. So I'm super excited to see where this goes, because we've been waiting a whole month to talk some positivity. And I think it's time. They earned it yesterday.
Absolutely. And the Browns were fun to watch yesterday. Like that was the bottom line. They were fun to watch. You felt like they had a chance as long as, the defense was on the field. You felt like they finally had that edge at home defensively. Like last year, the Cleveland Browns were untouchable at home because that defense was just suffocating. It legitimately did not matter who they put out at quarterback. It was PJ Walker. It was DTR. It was Joe Flacco. It was Deshaun Watson. Like it did not matter. At home, you have that defense. You are at least going to be in the game. That's what's going to happen. You felt like that was the case yesterday. I thought the defense played pretty well. Again, pressuring a quarterback, I don't care who the quarterback is. I don't care who the other offensive line is. By the way, Ravens' offensive line coming in this game was one of the best in the league. Just putting that out there. The Browns pressured Lamar Jackson on over 45% of his dropbacks. That
is crazy.
That's unheard of. Like that was a signature defensive performance. Now, the front seven looked good. Couple big runs from Derrick Henry. It's the best running back in the world right now. Like you got to figure that out. You expect something like that coming into that game. Granted, looking at Derrick Henry's numbers, like solid. You can hold that guy to 73 rush yards. I think you're okay with it. I think if you told the Browns that was going to be the case coming into the game, but yeah, that's totally fine. Obviously, the first drive, the huge stop on 4th and 1, 2, they were blowing stuff up when it mattered.
What was that call? Like that was a weird situation for the Ravens. Like, I mean, you got Lamar Jackson. Why not just line up in a pistol and go RPO or something like that? You go wildcat to Derrick Henry on 4th and 1. Like did Kevin Stefanski have the play sheet on that one?
He may have. Although I saw you tweet it out. It was so weird seeing him without a play sheet. So weird.
He's just standing there like this, and he, for once, we actually saw him more involved on the sideline too.
Yeah.
Like when they panned over, I can't remember who he was talking to, but I don't remember if it was Jameis, Winston, or it wasn't the quarterback position, which was why I thought it was different. It may have been somebody from the defense.
Yeah.
He was over there, and I just remember they panned over to him, and he had his hand on the sideline. He was like, you could tell he was being a little bit vocal. It's like, oh my gosh, like any other week, Kevin Stefanski's over here on the side, looking in his play sheet. So that was pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, it was very nice to see. And I thought Ken Dorsey, again, the offense looked different. The timing of pass plays I thought was very different too. I think when you looked at the Browns to start this year, a lot of the early down pass plays came when Watson was under center and there was a lot of play action stuff. There was some play action stuff yesterday. Don't get me wrong. Like the offense can only change so much with a new play caller. Like at the end of the day, the foundation of the offense is very similar, but I noticed the timing of the pass plays was very good. The timing of the run plays, we all know, like the Stefanski special is either multiple runs in a row or multiple passes in a row. I didn't see a ton. Like there was a lot of variety in what they were doing. Maybe this was a Jameis thing too. He was just straight up taking advantage of one-on-one matchups. Obviously, the Njoku touchdown, you felt like every time Cedric Tillman was one-on-one, he was going to throw him the ball, and it worked out most of the time. Like, it just felt different. It looked different. I thought the timing of the plays was the biggest thing, though.
You want to talk about signature Stefanski, right? Is this going to be signature Dorsey? So what's signature Stefanski? When we talk about signature Stefanski, I'm talking about in terms of play calling, 13 plays, 79 yards, 7-minute drive, right? How about this? How about 14 plays, 81 yards, 8-minute drive to open up a game? It didn't get a touchdown, but it got a field goal. But this is where I like to go better. 10 plays, 52 yards, 539. That's 2 in a row. You get the fumble on the next out of the half. 8 plays, 70 yards, 414. 6 plays, 72 yards, 241. 8 plays, 72 yards, 411, 9 plays, 69 yards, 137. How crazy is that I just reeled all of that off in the same game? We get 1 or 2 of those a game from Stefanski.
Yep.
We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them in one game.
It's insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Cleveland Brown, looking at some of the numbers too, like there was a lot of downfield shots. 7th out of all teams last week in average depth of target. Like they were throwing the ball down the field. And here's a crazy thing. When they weren't throwing the ball down the field at a crazy clip. Like it wasn't like they were just taking shots down the field, every other player, every 3 plays. It felt like that with Joe Flacco. I know we compared this to Flacco, but when Flacco was playing, like it literally felt like they were going for a Hail Mary every 3 or 4 plays. That's how it went. But the deep shots were more efficient. I can't remember the exact quote, but before the game, before that ridiculous, unbelievable Jameis pregame interview, it was so awesome. I can't remember what the exact question was or what the exact quote was from Ken Dorsey, but the CBS reporter basically said, Ken Dorsey said, be responsible, but don't be conservative. The deep shots the Browns took, for the most part at least, were responsible, but they weren't conservative. You were throwing the ball down the field, and you were taking advantage of one-on-one matchups. Like, this is, to me, the offense we expected walking into the year. That was like the first glimpse of it yesterday.
It was, because when you think about the Joe Flacco, like you just said, the Joe Flacco stuff kind of felt like Hail Marys every time. But I think the difference between the Joe Flacco and the Jameis Winston was we connected on a lot of that 15-yard stat is crazy. 9 completions of 15 yards or more. That's a big. We averaged 3rd and 12 throughout this season, and we did that 9 times throughout the game. It's just like, what I don't understand is, how did they pick up the blitzes so well? They were blitzing off the edge. It seemed like every other play. And J-Bo's just stepping in there and delivering. Like this, like you just said, was the offense that we were hoping for. And I tell you what, the defense is they chomping at the bit right now.
Yep.
They're like, oh, because I think it was Grant Delpit who came out on the interview yesterday that I was listening to. And he was like, yeah, man, shout out to 5, man. Hey, all you got to do is go out there and give us some points, and we're going to come out here and do our thing. Like, you could just tell that it was like, I was like, oh, man, maybe maybe they didn't want to play for 4. Maybe they did want to play for 4, but they riding with 5, and we about to put up another 25, 26 points next week. I believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And without getting too far into next week, there are a couple things to note. Browns defensively, Denzel Ward, another concussion. I believe that's his sixth concussion. At some point, if you believe in the Guardian cap, you just got to lean into it and do it. JOK stretchered off. He tweeted out this morning that he is okay, which is great. Weirdly enough, I didn't want to say this until we found out some more news on him. It really oddly reminded, you remember when Deontay Foreman got injured in camp?
Yeah.
And there's a stretcher, like he was immobilized on it. Like you're like, oh my God, what happened? And then you realize, okay, that was just a precautionary thing. It really reminded me of that because of the reaction to it. Like you thought it was something serious right away. And anytime you remove a face mask and immobilize somebody on a stretcher, obviously it looks serious. But you waited, and today or a couple hours ago, you saw a tweet. He's like, yep, I'm all good. I was like, okay, like take a deep breath. Maybe it was a little bit of a scare. I don't know if he plays this week. Who knows? But that was definitely something to note too, because he played a great game. And as you look at the Chargers, everything they do really hinges on the run. Herbert's been throwing the ball a little bit more recently, but their offensive line is really good. J.K. Dobbins is playing really well. Everything hinges on the run. So JOK can play this week. It's great. Another guy, Zadarius Smith, I thought played a great game. He's been involved in a lot of trade talks. I was watching Pat McAfee this morning. Adam Schefter was one of the guys that Schefter brought up as a potential trade target, but towards the back end of the list. And if you're the Browns, you feel like you got something, you're riding this momentum, you probably don't trade this guy, especially if you win this week and the trade deadline's next week. But those 3 guys stuck out to me. Was there anybody else on the defensive side of the ball that you thought played really well?
Of course, but before I get into that, I think with the JOK thing, we know JOK to be very. It's almost, I don't want to say LeBron-esque, but when it comes to his nutrition, his health, the way that he carries himself, and he wears every pad, he wears the Guardian cap. He's very conscious of that stuff. I think it's the moment he felt something not right, he's like, I'm not moving. I'm not taking any chances. We're just going to do this the right way. Yeah. I think he was being that type of thing because he gave us the fist pump after, so you knew he was in the good spirits. I think that was completely cautionary on his end, and obviously so. Yeah. You mentioned Zadarius Smith. I know the Lions have been in the rumbles with that. But like you said, like you mentioned, Juan Thornhill came on with his player interview today, and they were like, you look at the AFC standings, there's only a couple teams ahead of them as far as record, the record wise. Like this thing is wide, like if you're either really good or really bad, and there's nowhere between. So there's opportunity there, and you may not want to move on to Zadarius. He had a really good game yesterday, but you said who had a good game? Man, can we give some credit to the young man Mohamed Diabate?
Yeah,
this dude has been flying around like a missile. He had 9 tackles yesterday, and I just felt like every time there was a play that needed to be made, he was around the ball. And this is a second-year guy out of Utah. So it always seems like we had Alex Wright the 1 year. Grant Delpit, I think he started to come into his own his second year. JOK got into his groove his second year. It seems like the Browns and these second-year players really are starting to get away. Another one, Isaiah McGuire. I don't know. He doesn't pop out on the stat sheet, but he pops out on the film. He pops out when you're watching it. 57 seems to be everywhere on the field. And that's what you need to have. And, I think we also need to give some credit. Oh, Obo. I forgot. First time we called Obo's name all season.
Yeah.
Big sack, and you're getting a sack against Lamar Jackson. He got a sack last year against Lamar Jackson in the Obo Royer Bowl. He had a phenomenal game. He had 7 tackles and 1 for a sack, or 5 tackles and a sack. So I definitely think this defense, this was not a get right game, but this was we still got it game.
Yeah, and you needed that reminder, especially against an offense that literally felt like it could not be stopped. Like the Ravens were scoring more than they were punting. Like this was still is a really good offense. And 24 points, like it's a good amount of points. But when you have an offense now on the other side where you at least feel like you got a chance, you're not scared to throw the ball down the field. You got people who can make the plays on the ball as well as somebody who can deliver the deep balls. You feel like you got a chance. And anytime the Browns walk into this game, and I think we shared this sentiment coming into this year, anytime this team walks into a game, they're absolutely never a complete underdog because of the defense, because they can always keep it close. They can always make game-changing plays. Like, I go back to the Raiders game. I know they lost that game, but you think about that game and whoever made the mistakes, obviously the Cooper drop, the fourth down, all that stuff. They absolutely did not deserve to win that game, but they were in it because the defense scored. Like, that's the type of stuff. The Eagles game, too, absolutely did not deserve to win that or be in that game to begin with, but nonetheless win it. Special teams, blocked field goal, Myles Garrett, Rodney McLeod. Like,
Bengals game.
Yeah, literally, like anytime. Although the Bengals game was weird because, like,
Watson was decent.
Yes, Watson was good before he got hurt, and like you lean on your special teams all year long, and they return the opening kickoff for a touchdown. Like, I felt like that never happens with the Browns, but the defense will always keep you in games. Now, and we're always going to compare it to Joe Flacco for the next couple of years because that was the best team that the Browns have had in a minute. You feel something similar because even if you make mistakes, even if you're throwing the ball down the field, you got a quote-unquote gunslinger at quarterback who can lean into his teammates, who his teammates want to play for. We got to talk about that ridiculous tweet saying there's a problem with Jameis Winston in the locker room, too. That made me upset. But you always got a chance. Good defense, somebody who's going to throw the ball down the field, you have a chance. And that is where the Browns are at right now.
It's funny because I remember sitting here, and I think it was before the Philly game and then after the Philly game. And I remember us having this conversation, and we were looking at the schedule, and we were like, bro, how do we find 4 wins? I literally remember that coming out of our mouths, and now I'm sitting here and I'm looking at it and I'm like, bro, tell me why we can't beat the Chargers. Tell me why we not about to beat the Saints. Tell me why Pittsburgh is now on our radar if this is what we doing to the Ravens. Tell us now why. I mean, if Kansas City is still rolling and they're, let's just say you're right at the beginning of December football there, they can slip one up in the second week of November and lock in at the end of November or December. It's typical fashion. Miami, they're about a loss away from being done as well too. So like this went from how do we win 4 games to could we really go 6-4 or whatever on this next stretch out or 7-3 or 8-2? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but if you're going to get this out of the offense, I have no reason to believe that the defense isn't going to continue to do what they do. And at this point, sign me up for 1, 2, 3, 4. Realistically, up until that Chiefs game, you can sweep the Steelers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-game win streak.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
The city would go crazy. You'd be 6-4.
I think if the Browns can beat the Chargers, because I don't think the Chargers are pushover by any means. I think a lot of people, honestly, including myself, walked into this season thinking a lot less of the Chargers than what they have been. But if they can beat that team, that's a tough football team. You're going to beat 2 really tough football teams back to back. You go into your bye, which to me, after you play the Ravens and Chargers, it's literally could not come at a better time because they're going to try to beat you up. That's the nature of both those teams. Then you go to New Orleans, 4-6, hosting Pittsburgh on Thursday Night Football. Might be the loudest that stadium's been in a while because of the hope you have, all the stuff you went through to get the hope you have, and obviously it's a rivalry game on primetime. So I don't want to get too far ahead. I know we don't want to get too far ahead, but I don't know. This is cautious optimism, but there's some truth behind it.
Oh, next week. That's why I said you're not gonna get full optimistic Zay yet because realistically we're still 2-6. Let's pump the brakes. We're just enjoying the win. It's been a month since we have had any conversations like this. It's been 5 games since we've had a winning conversation. So we're gonna feel a little good, and we're gonna look through that window just a little bit. But next week, you're gonna get me back if we win next week because. We'll be on our way to New Orleans, and I got to carry that energy there, baby.
Absolutely. And we'll have 2 weeks to do it, too. Hopefully it doesn't run out. That bye week, again, I think is coming at a great time for the Browns. Health-wise, I mean, knock on wood, they continue to stay healthy, but they've been solid so far. Obviously, some good, some bad. But bye week in the middle of the season is real nice. Again, you're going to be going into a tough stretch of games in late November, early December. Coming at a great time. I don't know. It's cautious optimism, but there is optimism for sure.
I see 1, 2, 3, 4 division games ahead of us. That's a quarter worth of football right there. That is very, very important for this AFC, because now as I look at the standings, Pittsburgh's sitting at the top at 5-2. Let's just say the Giants pull one out today. This becomes an interesting conversation if the Bengals. Who do the Bengals play next week?
The Bengals. Let's see. The Bengals play Vegas.
Ooh, so another. So I mean, Vegas has played everyone well in the AFC North this week. This year. So this is and then they play the Ravens after that, and then the Chargers, who we just played, and then the Steelers. So the what was a soft schedule for the Bengals, sitting at 3-5 right now.
Yep.
You got an opportunity to make up some ground here, especially if you can get 2 wins on the motherfucking Steelers.
Yep, exactly. And those division games are going to be enormous for the Browns. One, we talk about it's like a separate season, rivalry games, all that stuff. But like right now, looking at the teams behind the Cleveland Browns in the wild card, you have 1, 2, 3 teams with multiple divisional losses. Obviously, the Browns don't have that. Even a team ahead of them, like the Indianapolis Colts, they already have 3 divisional losses. Mm-hmm. You have the Bengals at 1-1 who are ahead of you. You'll play them again, so you can give them another divisional loss. The Dolphins ahead of you. You play them. You can give them another divisional loss. The Chargers, 1 loss already divisionally. You can give them another divisional loss. The Ravens, 1 divisional loss right now to you. You're going to play them again. They don't really control their own destiny. I mean, obviously, if they win out, they're probably going to make the playoffs. But there's a lot of teams that they play that are ahead of them. You have, obviously, Pittsburgh twice. You have Baltimore again. You have the Chargers. You have the Bengals again. You have the Dolphins. And you have the Chiefs, who are at the top of the AFC. And to be honest with you, as good as the Broncos are playing, I don't think the Broncos are going to catch the Chiefs. So you do play the Chiefs, but the Chiefs, to me, aren't going to be in the wild card race with you. You got some teams
I mean, you control your destiny. Like you said, you say you may not control it, but when you look at the list, like what you just said, Dolphins you play, Bengals you play, Colts you don't play, but the Chargers you play, Ravens you still got 1 more, Denver you still got to go to, Steelers you got both games, Chiefs you got it. Those are all teams that are ahead of you.
Yep.
You win those games,
you're making the playoffs. 11 wins. Yeah.
You're in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, you can drop one to the Chiefs. But you need, I think you need both for the Steelers.
I think they got to go 3-1 in the division to end the year. The losses, if they go 3-1, that 1 loss, I mean, ideally you prefer the 1 loss to be to whoever wins the AFC North. That's kind of how that would go. But I think if they go 3-1 in the division, I think 10 wins probably will get you in. I think because of how because of how mid the 7 through 12 seeds are in the AFC right now, I think 9 wins could get you into the last playoff spot, to be fully honest with you. But 1 week at a time. I don't want to get too far ahead of it. They got to beat the Chargers, who again are ahead of them and are playing solid football right now.
Yeah, man, and Jim Harbaugh, we always play the Chargers is always such a duel, bro. I just think about the past couple games, the Baker Mayfield one where we in LA and it was 44-41 or something like that, and it was a shootout. And then the one game where they were here and Eckler had the 60-yard run, and it's just they always seem to have some kind of our number. So definitely gonna be a good test, and we need another win at home, man. Bad.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think they're going to get it. I will talk a little bit more down the week about it. But are there any final words you want to give Browns fans before we sign off on our Victory Monday podcast, the first one in about a month?
Man, I mean, enjoy the week, honestly. Lock in. But once let's turn the page up about Friday. We'll enjoy this week. We're gonna enjoy it well. Don't get too far ahead. Okay, it's okay to have fun, but don't be cocky. Cocky is where we go wrong. So lock in. We got a big game this week. I'm expecting a big turnout in the Muni lot. And let's stack these freaking wins, all right?
Let's do it.
Here we go, Ronnie. Here we go.
All right, guys. We appreciate you watching. We appreciate you listening. We'll see you next time. Go Browns.